Welcome to another episode of the Thunder Stock Show, a collection of valuable brainstorms to enhance your life, liberty, and pursuit of property. Today's guest, John DiCanio, is from New York, the center of the universe for at least commerce. John is a seasoned specialist in alternative finance. He has a career spanning over 16 years dedicated to building and scaling high-impact sales and funding organizations. He's also trained over 3,000 people in sales. So, John, pleasure to have you. I'm sure talking to strangers is the easiest thing for you to do, given your track record.
Yes, and I love having these types of conversations. I appreciate you having me on the show, Ross. It's definitely a pleasure. So I go back in sales a little bit more than 16 years. So before this alternative space, I was in mortgages, and then before that, Wall Street. So I do have a long history of being in sales.
All right. Let me ask you pop culture. Have you seen the movie Wolf of Wall Street?
Yes, and great movies. And so let me tell you right off the bat, that's how I learned how to do sales.
Was it
Was
what was
from
it?
actually Jordan Belfort. Yes. So on Wall Street, so as a young kid on Long Island, that's the major firm that was out here. And that's how I learned how to do sales was from
Stratton
him, from
Stratton
Stratton.
Oakmont?
Yeah. So half of the guys on Long Island are Stratton, Oakmont guys. So I learned from everybody that's worked there and the straight line system on how to do sales. And I basically took that over the 25, 30 years that I've been in sales. And I sort of use it in every I guess, sales situation I've ever been in for mortgages and then now into this and the alternative sales. So yes, was it like that? Yes. Did he have those types of parties? Yes. Was he a maniac? Yes. And was the people that worked for him maniacs? Yes. But I was young then. So so I
Hey.
came in probably like the last 2 weeks of that being around, but it's the aura of the place stuck with me going into other Wall Street places and other firms on Long Island.
Well, I'm glad I started with that question.
I'm glad you did too, because I didn't even let you know that. So that was like a perfect
No.
timing.
That was genuine shock. And we're going to have a great convo right
We're
there.
definitely gonna have a good conversation now. Now we're ready to go.
Holy smokes. I'm fired up. Whatever the feeling is the opposite of Quaaludes. That's me.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I guess that's cocaine and then hookers. No.
I'll do Diet Dr. Pepper. But this conversation has got me hook, line, and sinker. I want to make sure we stay with between the lines and the straight line sales here.
100%.
Not that I have anything to sell you, but so when you were growing up in that area,
Hmm.
did you know that you wanted to be a Wall Street guy like from a young age? Or was it
No,
just kind of like, how did you get
actually,
into it?
so it's a crazy story. So, uh, I was into cars when I was when I was younger. My family got divorced, and then my stepfather was heavily into building race cars. So I got into being a mechanic, auto body, that kind of stuff, hanging out with the wrong people, doing that kind of crazy stuff, going out, getting into fights. So one night I got into a fight. A lot of people got in trouble. A lot of people got hurt. I was like, you know what? I got to change my life from what I'm doing. And a cousin that lived in Staten Island at the time was like, yo, these kids from Staten Island are on Wall Street, but they're making big money, 30, 50, $100,000 a month. I'm like, what the hell is Wall Street? you know, I didn't even know what it was. You know what I mean? I didn't know. I didn't never watch, CNBC or anything like that back in the
Sure.
day. And then he introduced me to somebody that was in the space, but it was out in Manhattan. And then I literally went into there. I saw what was going on. And then I was like, well, I can't travel every day. And then that's how I found it here in Long Island. But after that, that changed my life. Where literally I walked into this place, they gave you a script, they gave you 4 rebuttals, and, being from where I'm from, it was half of Italians and half of them were Russians. So you have Russians that could barely speak English, and then you have all the Italian guys going in and they're saying, just say this pitch and these rebuttals. And it worked. And people would just be like, okay, I'll take 50,000 shares. I'll take 100,000. I'll take 200 shares. And, like, I think within like 2 weeks, I think I made like $3,000 or $4,000, which wasn't a lot at the time, but not knowing anything, walking
Yeah.
in, just
From the
reading,
street.
right, just
Yeah.
reading a pitch with rebuttals to make that kind of money, then obviously, I wanted to, get a little bit serious. And then, like I said, getting in the tail end of that company, got to really to understand how to sell and the psychology behind selling. And then that just took the game to a whole new level. And I think it was in Wall Street probably for a good 6 years before like it really went crazy. And then when that happened, I moved over to mortgages.
Yeah. I mean, difference between mortgage and Wall Street. I mean, you're still selling a financial
Right.
thing. It's just instead of it being Wall Street and stocks, it's people's
It's
homes.
just
It's still
mortgage notes. And then,
yeah.
and that was a crazy business too, because I'd happen to get in right when the refinance boom was hitting, when it, was at like 12, 13%, and it dropped down to 6%. So yeah, I know, right? The rates before that, after that became as low as 3%, but that was a refinance boom. So a guy with my talent of sales was made it very easy to take over. So I went to go work at a firm, walked in the company, I started doing the mortgages. And then I'm like, yeah, I can take this over. I told the owner, I'm like, listen, give me 30 days. I'm going to learn your product. I'm going to manage your whole office and teach your whole office. We wind up getting 100 guys, funding about 100 million a month in mortgages. And that was a good run for another 5, 6 years. And
Man.
then once again, things happen. The industry gets, excuse my French, gets shit on a little bit. And because of what happened with the mortgage bust, and then I found my way into alternative financing.
So one more movie question. Have you seen the movie The Big Short?
Yes. So
Don't tell me you worked there too.
No. But I want to give you something that alludes to that. So during the movie in The Big Short, do you remember when they were going out and talking to all the mortgage brokers?
Yes.
That was me, right? So I was the mortgage broker, right? Saying, yeah, I got strippers who have 6, houses out in Arizona because there was $60,000-$70,000 at the time with no doc loans. I wasn't as stupid as them, with some of the questions that they were asking them, but
you were trained by the wolf. You knew better.
But you did see the writing on the wall, and what how I really saw it. Obviously, I didn't see the back end side on what Wall Street was seeing on with the notes and not being triple A rated. Is that I just saw that I had a pipeline of like 50, 60 deals that I couldn't start closing, and I was like, oh, something's going on. I'm like, usually these things close. I can get
bread
them done.
And butter.
Yeah, if there are no doc loans, you got verification of employment, verification of deposits into the bank. Normally, you have those things. Everything's ready to clear to close. They just started not closing, and just the banks weren't answering. They weren't getting back to you. You have a 50 to 100 files sitting on your desk, and you're not funding anything. I knew something was there. And I'm just, once again, I didn't know that the collapse was going to happen. I didn't have that crystal ball. I wish I did. But I said, I'm not making money. I got to find something else to do. Deals aren't closing. And then somebody that used to work for me in the mortgage business was like, John, I went to go see this guy. It's in Manhattan. They're doing financing, alternative financing. So this all leads into the same thing. So I go in for the interview, and it turns out to be one of my mentors on Wall Street.
No shit.
That used to work at Stratton Oakmont. He was one of the top guys. He was actually in Jordan's book, and he was like, "Oh my God," and that's how the guy talks. So, "Hey, guy, how you doing? How's it going on?" With the cigar in his mouth, the whole 9 yards. And he taught me this side of the business. And then, honestly, now it's been 17 years.
Dude, I just need to make an observation. When you were in cars and, living that rowdy younger person life and you get into fights, there's something to be said that you probably learned a bunch of street smarts doing that.
Yeah. I mean, listen, like I said, because my parents got divorced when I was young, so I had to start work early. And it was always about trying to make money somehow, whatever it was. And it wasn't even, back then they would say, "Oh, you're either dealing drugs or this," but it wasn't even that. It was just
whatever.
Trying to hustle, do whatever it take to make money. Because I lived with my mom at the time. I had to make sure that I covered some of the rent. Even while I was in high school, and I think it was like 10th grade. That I had to go get a job. Sometimes I would go to school late because I would have to work sometimes in the morning to make sure that we had rent and make pay. So like it was instilled in me to always work. My father was, a company man. He worked for the Baby Bells, AT&T, then Lucent, and then that blew up, meaning that they kept telling him buy the stock, buy the stock, buy the stock. Meanwhile, the company was going out of business. He lost his retirement. He had over $1 million in retirement. The stock went from $70 a share to like 10, 15 cents a share, right? So like I seen that, and I didn't want to do that either, even though, they had a great childhood when I was a kid. I didn't have to ask for anything, but when they got divorced, it became hard. And I knew I always had to work. Cars became a good thing. I would buy a car, fix it up, sell it. Buy another car, fix it up, sell it, make a couple $1,000s doing that. And that's, I guess, my beginning of sales, right? Because I had to learn how to sell the car.
Yeah,
but that was a passion. Yeah, and it was a passion for me because I loved cars. Yeah.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is "use what you got." And it seems like at that time you had some, really awesome lessons learned. Maybe they were tough at the time, but like you can't go to college and get a degree in how to make shit work and make sure your mom pays her rent. That's just something that you're bred in your experience.
Yeah, and honestly, I wouldn't change anything about finishing high school because I didn't. I got my GED,
Yeah.
or going to college. I see my friends that went to college. I'm not saying that any of them aren't doing well because some of them are, but there's a lot of people that went to college that can't even shine my shoes. No offense to anybody out there,
No, it's
but
true. It's true.
but the grind is what made me who I am today. I always put my back up against the wall, no matter how much money I'm making, because as soon as I take that breath and relax, is when I'm going to need to work harder. So I always constantly work hard, and I always put my back up against the wall to make sure I'm always working as hard as possible.
Yeah, I think, to that point about college, you've sold stocks, you've sold mortgages, you sold alternative financing, you've sold a lot of people to,
Yes.
take on debt for a good cause, right? Whatever,
Yes.
whatever that was. But knowing what you know about selling securities and things, look, this is not financial advice. I'm not trying to get in trouble with anyone, whoever's listening. But like, why is it so easy to sell 18-year-olds on $200,000 of student loan debt? But like, they can't get a fucking funding. They can't get a house
Right.
approval. They can't get a business loan. Like, to me, it sounds like maybe that should be investigated next as a movie.
Well, I listen. I agree. I think curriculum in schools should be teaching these kids how to build credit. Listen. At 16 years old, most kids out there are starting to work. They're getting a paycheck, but they're not shown how to build their credit. Because
Right.
the time they're 18, 20 years old, they should be and have enough credit to buy a house or do an investment property, let's just say.
Sure. Sure.
Right. But nobody taught me that either. So, like, I wish somebody earlier on would have taught me how to do that and build my credit up, because I didn't probably build my credit up till after Wall Street. Like, I still wasn't even on that same plane that I am on now, because they were just like, go buy yourself a $40,000 Rolex watch. Go buy yourself a $100,000 car. Don't worry, you'll make the money. So nobody taught me, instead of saying buy the $100,000 Ferrari, put the $100,000 in the bank, fix your credit, put that down on a multifamily house, and you'll have income for the rest of your life.
Right.
Nobody's ever said that to me. So it took me, a little while to learn that side of being in the finance space. I was good with other people's money, not mine.
Hey, but you learn lessons.
But you
But
do,
again, it goes back
right?
to that hard knocks, like the street smarts. You got to learn those lessons with a price. It's just your
You have to.
experience.
And those experiences is what I feel makes most successful people, right? Yes. Do you see kids coming out of, Ivy League schools doing very well because they have their family? Most of it's family stuff. But, the real successful guys that you see that become multimillionaires or billionaires, those are the guys that didn't go to college. They just grinded. They hustled. They learned how to do business on the street, like as you say, by reading books. And I read sales books too. Like Og Mandino. Love that guy. Napoleon Hill. Those guys who are authors. Those guys really taught me business and selling at the same time.
Yeah, and I do want to go back to one of your experiences at Stratton that it carries you through, to today, where you train over 3,000 people. What are your thoughts on training somebody like yourself, right? Say, John, today, you have to go train John, who just got out of that fight. We're doing the car thing. Do you think it's easier to train somebody who has the DNA and like the skill set and like that intangible things with no experience than somebody who has got 5, 10 years of sales experience? They've been trained by somebody else in a different method. Like, who would you
Yes.
rather train?
I'd rather train the raw talent,
Yeah.
right? Because the guys that have been trained by the wrong people are set in their ways, and they think they know everything. They don't want to learn on really how to sell. And sales evolves over the years too, right? Because 25 years ago, it was hard selling tactics that worked, right? There was no research, like I'm showing my age, but when I was on Wall Street, like, nobody had computers at the time.
Sure.
Right. So whatever you told them, they believed you. So you had to be really good at selling that story. Right. Now you have to be more open about what you're doing and be a little bit different on how you sell it. And it can't, can you still have the hard sell in you? You can, but it's more, being, hey, this is what I want to do for you. I want to show you how to make this work for you, because now there's a lot more research you could do, right? People go online now, you hit a button, you can see who everybody is online, right? Back then you couldn't. So you could, that whole quotation in Wolf of Wall Street, act as if, right? You can act as if, but now you need to be able to show it.
Right.
Right. Back then, you can act as if nobody was going to see you over the phone. You can act like you're the CEO. You can act like, you drive a Bentley or you have a $100,000 watch. Now, people could look you up online. If you say, oh, yeah, I got I'm worth $5-10 billion. Okay, let me look you up. Oh, you're not. So, the act as if is, the thought on that has to change. You can act as if you are the CEO of the company, but treat people like that. Treat them, that you're going to teach, give them the white glove treatment when they come talk to you, how they would want to be treated.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy how sales has evolved. And I agree that with the age of the internet, and especially with all these AI research and how you can just look.
You can do anything now these days.
I was mentoring a kid who was still in high school, just like hungry, he wants to get in entrepreneurship. And I was like, "How are you responding to work during the day? Aren't you at school?" He goes, "Oh." He's like, "I jailbroke my laptop so I can do work." He goes,
Right.
"I just put all this shit through ChatGPT. I have a 4.0 at the top of my class." And I'm like, "Didn't they ban that?" He's like, "Yeah, I found the loophole how to you
I'm
still use it."
sure.
And I'm just like, I love that hustle because when I was in school, you couldn't, you still had to go to the library.
Yeah.
You're highlighting book pages, all that stuff. Like
You
it
actually have to
sucked.
do manual research.
It sucked.
Now everything's at your fingertips. You can do anything you want. You can write essays. You can, you could
Yeah.
have research done in a matter of 10 minutes with diagrams and graphs and charts, everything in a matter of 10, 15 minutes. Back then, you had to do it all yourself.
And to your point, though, how there's a lot of things in sales that stay the same and the things that change, like the technology, I'm sure changes it, the
Yes.
research, like maybe regulations, I don't know. But the thing
Yeah,
that
it
I
does, and
find,
that changes too. In every industry that I've been in, the regulations have changed. Obviously, same thing on Wall Street, licenses and all that
yeah,
kind of stuff. That's changed. But to me now, it's not as good as it was years ago when you were a stockbroker, because now you have Charles Schwab, you have everything's online. You can sort of do your own research, like we're talking about, where you can just hit a button, and why would they need a guy telling him to buy AT&T? Or
right.
or anything of that nature, right? Or having the inside track on stocks these days, because that information now you can look it up yourself. You can do that same research now. Mortgages too. Back then, you really need a mortgage license to sell the mortgages. Now they, back in I think it was 2005 is when they really changed it, where everybody had to be licensed. And then you
Mm.
have to take, every 2 years, you got to just, renew the license, get asked a lot of questions about the laws of the mortgage industry and things of that nature. So, that changes. Right now, my industry is still unregulated. There is no licensing that you need right now. I feel that that's coming as well. I mean, I've been hearing it every year for the past 17 years that it's going to change, but it hasn't changed
Yeah,
yet.
but
But
it's not your first rodeo because you've been
no,
in
it's
other
not.
industries that have been through the changes, and that's experiences. You're like you've done a great job of pattern recognition of saying this has got to change at some point. How am I going to
Yes.
adjust? So I think where you're at today, all the lessons you've learned in the past gear you up to be pretty suited to handle it.
Yeah, you got to understand that, and I guess learn how to read some of the patterns that, especially, in the financial space. And, this industry is changing now too. Everything's getting geared towards AI. Like you have AI, text machines, you have AI voice, calls, you have AI underwriting already, so like the whole industry is changing. And if you can't pivot with it, you're just going to be left behind.
Man, one thing that I think doesn't change though is human nature, and we talked about it a little bit with the sales training, but I think people like if you have the skill that you've just hustled your way and experienced your way through with, you know, communication, being an open book, letting the conversation flow like water, but having the goal in mind. If you can sell, people ask me, what's the one thing that you hope for your daughter or whatever? Like
Right.
the one thing I want to teach her is how to sell. By the time she's 18, because she'll never have to worry about a paycheck in her life.
That's for sure. I mean, sales is good to know in any industry that you're in.
Yeah,
Any way you look, there's sales, right? And most people don't see it that way, right? But you're watching a commercial on TV, it's sales.
it
It's a
sells.
different type of sales, but it's sales. You walk into a convenience store and they have the gum, Tic Tacs, and everything up front. They're trying to sell you that, right? So everything is sales. Anything that we do is sales. I just a lot of when I first started sales, a lot of people were like, "How are you going to go into sales? Why don't you get a normal job, get a 9 to 5, you get a paycheck?" I'm like, I get it, but I closed one deal that makes your whole salary sometimes in a year, and the time you go 10 years in a company, 15 years in a company, maybe to start making 200,000-300,000 a year, right? Here in New York, starting salary, let's just say 60,000, for whatever job, but it might take you 10, 15 years to get up to the 300. The time now you're 40, 45, you start making that money, you could have enjoyed your life, you know?
You can't get it back.
Right. Well, that time is definitely something that you can't get back. And,
No.
and people are, I feel when you work the 9 to 5 jobs, people are stealing your time for their benefit. And I believe that when it comes to having a paycheck at the end of the day.
I mean, look, I agree with you, brother. There's some people out there that, whether it's the fear or whether it's the conditioning, whatever the psychological thing it is, they think it's more safe to have a job.
They do.
And my question to them is, like, how much belief? Well, look, if that's what they want to do, if someone wants to be a firefighter or a teacher, God bless you. We need those
Listen,
guys.
and I like people like that.
I love those people.
You want to be a firefighter, you want to be a cop, you want to be a teacher. To me, that's a great job because you're helping people, right?
But you're
But
aware of who you are. I think it goes
right,
back to human nature.
I
Like,
agree.
if you're geared like John or me, you don't have to do what you're told. In fact, if you do what you're told, you might be miserable,
You're going to
and
be miserable.
yeah, if your life might suck. So
Because
what?
remember, you're working extra hard for somebody else that's just giving you a paycheck for them to get to the next level.
And they're being sold whether they want to admit it or not. If they're
No, they're
geared like
sold.
us,
They're definitely getting sold.
yeah, they're getting sold on something. So you can do the sell or be sold, right?
Right, and that's the old saying, right? When you make a phone call, it's either you're the one doing the selling, or you're the one being sold, right? So you got to pick and choose which one you want to be. There's a lot of people out there, they're okay being sold. They're okay living that 9 to 5. They're getting that paycheck. They get their insurance covered. They get and that's great. And I don't put down anybody for that, for living that type of a life. But when people try what I call a dream stomper, where they tell
Mm.
me, "How could you not work without a paycheck?" I say, I said, because I get more than a paycheck every week, meaning that as more time I put in, the harder I work in sales, the bigger deals that I close, the more money I make is bigger than that paycheck. And that can happen for me in 2 hours a day. It doesn't have to be an 8 hour day. Don't get me wrong. I still work 10, 12 hours a day because I just love the game and I love being in sales. I love training my guys on the floor. So, like, to me, 12 hours a day is nothing, right? But
Yeah.
at the end of the month, when I look at how much I make, and then if you want to break it down by hour, it's more than what most people are making per hour. So I'm okay with that.
Plus, you mentioned something that's just we need to touch on.
Right.
You freaking love what you do.
Yes, I
So it
do.
doesn't feel like, because if you
Yeah.
hated doing it, then 12 hours would be like,
Oh
okay,
yeah,
half
I want
my
to get out
time
of
is
here.
in jail.
But how
Yeah.
many people that you meet that are on a paycheck to paycheck basis love their job? Besides the firefighters and maybe the cops and the teachers, but how many people do you know that love their job, love saying, "Hey, it's Monday, I want to go to work"? How many people do you hear say that? You don't. I
Maybe
love it.
10%.
Right.
And I think I keep good company, like maybe 10%.
But I wake up excited every morning, at 7 o'clock in the morning to get my day started, knowing that if I pick up the phone and I talk to the right person today and I close a whale, I make a ton of money today. I'm excited for that. But listen, it's not only about the material things as well, but I like to make money for my family too, right? I help my mother out, I help my
Sure.
father.
Sure.
That's really my why, and what I do is my why is my family. Yes, do I like to have nice cars, nice watches? Yes, I love that. But my
Sure.
real why is taking care of my family. They took care of me when I was young. I want to be able to do that now for them.
You know, it's so important to figure out your why too, because I think a lot of people that are miserable, like we talked about, people that do the
Right.
9 to 5, and they do it because they think that that's what they have to do,
Right.
not because they understand that if you have a why, you can endure almost anyhow.
I
Because
agree.
I'm sure there's times in your career where stuff happened with Wall Street or stuff happened with
Oh,
mortgages. You're like, what the hell am I going to do?
I agree.
But you knew your why, right? I'm going to take care of my family. No
Yes.
matter what it is, I'm going to use what I got, take care of my family, and it's going to be okay.
Listen,
Though it might have sucked at the
Listen,
time.
there was days, more than days, weeks, dead broke, no money. I had to walk into a shopping center and put, spaghetti in my pants because it's easy to make, right? It's just boiled water and spaghetti, with butter on it to eat sometimes. So, like, I get it. I've been there. I've not had money. I've not had money to get on a train, to try to get a job in the city or something like that. So I get it. But I think people convolute their why to what they do, right? Because, well,
Mm.
why do you work for this company? Well, I'm making $1,000 a week. Why are you working there? Well, I got a child. I got a sick mother. Okay, but it's $1,000 a week. When if you are whatever job it is, if you're a computer technician, right? Why wouldn't you open up your own place? You make more money. If you're that good at what you do, I get why you have the job. So when you work your 9 to 5, when you come home at 5:30, why aren't you building your own business? If you're that good at what you do, right? So if you're, like I said, even if you're a mechanic, right? I get it. You want to work for somebody, you want that paycheck. But on the weekends that you don't work there, why aren't you trying to get your own jobs and start your own, to be an entrepreneur? And people are scared to take that step and leave that comfort of that paycheck every week. So their
And
why sometimes overlooks what they do.
look, I want to talk to you about sales training because I'm getting fired up just hearing
Okay.
that. Because hearing what you're talking about makes me I need to go on this rabbit hole.
Right.
Sell or be sold. They haven't sold themselves yet.
Right.
They haven't sold themselves yet.
And if they
So
haven't sold themselves, they'll never be a salesman.
how can you sell anyone else if you
Right.
haven't
If
sold
you're not
yourself?
sold on what you can do for yourself, you're never going to sell anybody, right? If you're not
Hit
confident in yourself, forget about what the product is, right? And believe me, it does count on what you're selling. And because if you don't believe in the product either, but that's a whole other story. Sure. But if you're not selling it, confident in yourself to sell what you have or what you have inside, you're never going to become a confident salesperson because you're just going to let people roll over you because you're not confident in yourself.
I coached wrestling and MMA. That was one of my
Love it.
things that I did.
I'm a
right.
big
So
UFC guy, so I love it.
love UFC. I'm sure you might be a fan of like Chris Weidman.
Well, so Chris
Right.
Wyman grew up here on Long Island, so
Yeah.
a lot of my friends are friends with him because they all roll and in the UFC and they do that kind of stuff. So yes,
Yeah. I'm more of the Philly. A lot of the Philly guys. There's one guy from my area, Dustin Stoltzfus. He's in
oh, I know who he is.
Lancaster. Yeah,
I know
he's
the
from
name.
Lancaster. I trained with him a couple of times, and
Yeah,
you know
look a little
what?
jacked up there. I see you.
I've been retired a couple of times, but
You look like you have the wrestler's body, though.
you can't see the ears, but
there they are. Look at that.
the dead giveaway. I keep them covered up for business purposes.
That's all right. But listen, that's part of you, part of who you are, man. Don't hide it,
bro. But when I coach, I like coaching a lot because get a certain age, you got to know what's in your body too. Like
that's for sure.
Like I get paid a hell of a lot more to do my business than I do to fight, and I tried to make a living off of fighting. Made some money, but I also realized the ROI. I sold myself out of it once I saw the money aspect. Right.
I mean, especially, listen, the sport over the last 10 years has become huge now. But back then, what were you getting? $50 a fight just to, do it and get your brains beat in?
I made like $1,200 in a year, and that was my best year. Like, what is that?
Right. I get it.
But to the point is, there's some people you can't convince them not to fight. No matter what you try to do, you cannot convince them. No matter what the money is, no matter what the success chance is, they don't give a shit. They're so determined they're gonna fight, and that's what they're gonna do. And then there's some people that say, "I'm gonna fight because I like the UFC or because I think it's cool or I'm into it." And I'm like, "Okay, well, are you gonna win?" And if they don't say yes,
what are you fighting for?
Then don't fight. You're either all in, you sold yourself that you're going to win every fight, or you at least have the ability to win every fight, or you shouldn't do it at all because the risk is so bad.
Right. But, from, what you just said before, like, just like, being a natural born salesman, then there's natural born fighters too. Right. Yeah. Or, once again, not every salesman is born. You can breed a sales guy too. And that's the same thing with a fighter, right? You can breed a fighter, that maybe not have it in him to be that, snap your neck type of a fighter, but you can also breed a fighter to know how to fight, the art and science of fighting, right? So and that's the same thing with sales, because there's an art and science to it. It's not just picking up a phone, and saying a couple of lines and think that you're going to sell somebody. There's a science behind, there's psychology behind sales, getting people to agree with what you're saying, getting them to understand it and giving you a yes answer a couple of times in a row before you can actually close the deal. So there's a science behind sales, and it's not just here's a pitch, here's the rebuttals that work for me. If you don't understand what you're saying, it's not going to work. I don't care how many times you read it, how many times you think you understand it. If you're not fully understanding what you're saying, that science doesn't work.
It's the same as boxing, the same as fighting. It's a sweet science for both.
Yes.
Like, you think that you're just going in there with a blind rage, throwing hands like this, you're gonna get have a bad day.
100%.
You have a bad day, and same with sales. But to my question, you've trained 3,000 around that number of
3,000 people in this space.
And let me tell you, when I first started coaching, I had to then look back and build my own confidence that I, could be there. And then when I started coaching for a couple of years, I'm like, oh, new person, come on in. This is what we're going to do. Blah, 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 blah. What was it like for the first person you trained and then the 3,000s? Like, how did you develop as a trainer?
Honestly, I couldn't even tell you when the transformation happened, because I think it just happened smoothly, from just being a top sales guy to guys just coming next to me and asking me questions. And then I realized that, as the old saying says, iron sharpens iron.
Yep.
The more I trained, the better I got,
Yeah.
because I was just constantly out there, sales tactics that I didn't remember. Let's just say that I learned 10 years ago, but a guy asked me a question. It's in here somewhere in my library, and then it would come out. I'm like, oh my God, I haven't used that in a long time. And then it just sharpened, it makes me sharper. So I didn't really see the transition, at first in this space until probably 3 or 4 years in, when I went and got a job in Manhattan. It was a 100-man firm already. They were doing good numbers. I walked in, the guy knew who I was, and he was like, John, he's like, I just need another closer. I said, no problem. I said, but give me a month. I think I'm going to take over this place. Right. He goes, nah, he's like, we already got managers. I'm like, okay, great. So the first month, I think I blew out like $2 or $3 million in funding. So everybody was asking me questions. And then I just started giving meetings, and I just took it upon myself to take over. And then, that job led to probably one of the best relationships in the space that I have. He's still a mentor of mine. When I walked away with a severance package to go start my own company. Like, that's how good it was, right? And and he's an older guy, older than me, not too much older. But when I took over, he goes, Johnny, I didn't think you were going to take over for my managers. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He goes, they were very hard guys. So, they wanted to run the office. He's like, but you came in and sort of people just flocked to you, and you became the manager. I said, well, I told you I was going to do it. I saw what was there, and I saw that they couldn't compare to what I do, and didn't have the same sales skills or techniques that I had. So I was closing more deals. So, they wound up leaving because they weren't getting their override anymore because I took over. But, listen, it's not a fair game when it comes to sales, and the cream always rises to the top.
When we say not a fair game, that just means there's winners and losers.
Well, yeah, and that's what I mean. Meaning that it's not fair. Meaning that if you're not putting 100% into it, and I'm going to come out on top, right? Whether it's a bad day, because listen, I don't always have good days, but it's how I handle the bad days, right? I don't name the day bad unless I name it bad, right? So it's not a bad day unless I name it bad. Even though it could be bad, I could have got a deal in and I lost the deal at closing. It's not a bad day. Want to know why? Because then I could put this headset on or pick up a phone and talk to the next guy and get a deal closed.
Yeah, your mom's rent's paid for.
Right.
Your kids got clothes. They got a safe place to go. Like, I think that people sometimes forget how you can be ambitious and driven, but you should also be like, look, is there space to have gratitude? Like, my shit's covered, And
And if
the
it's
easiest
not,
frame, yeah, go ahead.
and I don't mean to cut you off, but if
Good.
it's not covered, how are you sitting there in slow motion, right?
And feeling sorry for yourself.
Right.
Is that helping the situation, feeling sorry for yourself?
No, it actually makes it worse. Your psychology changes, because now you're talking bad about yourself. When you put stuff out in the air, you got to put the good stuff out in the air, right? Because your body doesn't know that you're talking or doing bad things unless you put it there, right? Oh, I suck. I can't do this. The more you do that, your mentality changes and you start thinking that you really suck or you really can't do that. That's why power of positivity for me is one of the key things in sales, is that I'm always positive, right? If I lose $1 million deal, great, no problem. You know what? I'm that good. I know I'll get another one. Or, if I say, hey, I lost $1 million, holy I suck, man. I can never get the big deals. Guess what? You'll never get that big deal. Never. Right. I don't care how much more work you put in. If you're negative in your brain, your psychology is telling you you're no good, and it's going to reflect on that phone call to the client or merchant that you're talking to. They're going to hear that you don't have any self-esteem, and they're not going to want to work with you, and you'll never get that big deal because they're not confident that you know what you're doing.
It goes back to what you said earlier, John. The most important person to sell is yourself.
Right.
And what you tell yourself freaking matters because you're going to believe it. So I want to tell you a quick story. It's about just a little bit of my journey that I think you might find interesting. When I started the company, I had made an exit from a firm, a private equity firm, was one of the co-founders, grew it to 10 mil a year. And, decided to have a kid, had my first child, was like, I'm going to do something else for me. Like, I'm going to have 100% ownership,
right?
Do my thing. All fine and great. Got a beautiful, healthy baby at home, just did my first exit. Like, that was meaningful. A lot of confidence, right? I'm like, all right, we're hitting the ground. Dude, my godmother, so my aunt, my closest female relative, that's not my mom, whatever, dies. Grandmother dies. Mother gets hit by a car, dies. Tear my ACL, so I can't walk. And there was probably, I'll be honest with you, like that was a tough,
That had
did,
to be rough.
didn't expect it, right? Didn't forecast it, but you know what? I felt sorry for a couple like days, couple weeks where I just kind of
Right.
took it chill, took it easy. And then I thought to myself, well, I can either sit here and feel sorry for myself, and then my newborn kid is going to suffer, or I can get the freak up and sell something,
Right.
because none of that stuff I didn't do any of that stuff. Like, I just, shit happens. And as soon as I made the decision to say, all right, well, picking up this phone and talking to a prospect is going to be a hell of a lot easier than talking at my mom's funeral,
I
which is
agree.
kind of dark,
It
but it's
is.
true. You know,
It is.
if you can talk at your mom's funeral, you can talk to freaking anybody.
That's for sure.
And anyway, I think your positivity mindset, it's not that you can't experience bad feelings or bad thoughts. It's you can't let them change your mind about yourself and your goals.
Yeah, you just can't let it overpower you because a lot of
Yeah.
people do, and I met some of the best people out there, some of the worst people, but some of the worst people had more confidence than the people that didn't, and those guys made it. And those guys, so I used to, and I'll give you a quick backstory.
Yeah.
So when I worked in Manhattan, right, and I had my guys working for me, we go out to lunch, and I have some producers, and then a lot of the guys don't produce, as 20% produce 80% of the revenue, right? So, but I would go out and I'd say, you know what? I guarantee you, I could pick anybody out sitting in the street begging for nickels, and if he has the power in himself, he could become a salesman. And I used to do it. I used to pluck homeless guys off the street. I'd give him money. I put him in a hotel for the night, take a shower, get shaved. So he comes in next day, put him on the phone. I've had, let's just say out of 10 people, I'd had a good, 40% success stories
Really?
of people that just came in, they saw an opportunity to change their life. They were sitting on the corner in Manhattan, going like this with a tin cup, looking for money, and taught them how to do sales. My main thing with those guys was this: is I'm not going to give you $500 because you might go spend it on alcohol or whatever.
Right.
But
Right.
I would put you in the hotel. I pay for the hotel for a day or two so you can get your stuff together. I wouldn't pay you a salary. I'm going to teach you how to close. So if you're really that hungry, you're going to learn. You're not going to leave this desk until you close something. And I've had guys work until 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night calling California because they can call California until they actually got a deal and closed the deal within a few days to put $1,000 in their pocket. And then my whole test was here's the $1,000. Now, if you show up, I know that you're looking to change your life. You don't show up, you have the talent, you just wasted it. And I've done that a few times. And there's people that will see this that worked for me, that was next to me when I did this, and they'll let you know that it's a true story. I've done it before.
Well, it goes back to the parable. You can teach a man you can either give a man a fish, teach him how to fish,
Right.
and he feeds himself. And if you taught someone how to fish, hey, it's on you to feed yourself
That's
now.
it.
But that's more charitable than giving someone money.
I could, don't get me wrong. I give people a couple of dollars here and there, but I couldn't give somebody $1,000 just to give them $1,000. Just I'm not built that way. But I'll teach what other people taught me to make as much money as you want to make. Listen, you're
It's
going to
more
have peaks,
valuable.
right?
It's
You're going to
more
have your
valuable than
peaks.
$1,000
You're going to have your values. It's going to be up and down. It's sales, so it's going to be up and down. But you got to understand and learn how to move it and ride. I tell everybody, ride the wave like a surfer, man. You see guys surfing and they're gliding, whether the wave is 20 feet high or it drops down to 2 feet, they're just keeping balance. And if you can keep a balance on those peaks and valleys, you're going to succeed no matter what you do.
John, what are some of the most important things, if you had to say one or two lessons in sales, that you just got to get through people's head if they want to get better?
So the number one thing is you got to show up. Honestly, that's the first part. Because if you don't show up, sales it's not going to work for you, right? And then just have like we spoke about, is just having a positive mentality. Those are the two things, right? Because listen, you can have all the talent in the world. If you don't show up and you don't actually work, it's just wasted talent. So like to me, like, I've had people come into my office, ultra talented, man, like beaming, like going like this. That's how much talent that they have. But when they come in, they're like this at their desk, you know, or they're slumped over like this. And they have the most insane talent you ever seen in your life. But then there's a guy that will walk in, have no talent, but work extremely hard and blow that guy out of the water, not knowing anything, but just working. Just the work ethic was second to none compared to the guys that have talent. So hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. You ever
Love
hear that
that.
saying?
Yeah.
Well, I live by that motto.
I had it on my dresser, my mirror growing up.
Right. So listen, when I
Yeah.
first started, I didn't have talent. So it was just the hard work. Now I have both. So now when I don't work, so now when I don't work hard, I say that to myself, I'm like, I got both, man. I like to work hard, and there's some days that will knock me down, and I'm not working as hard as I should. Then I say to myself, bro, I can just pick up the phone. That's how good I am. I can pick up a phone, talk to anybody, and make $1. And
Man,
that's what I would describe to anybody, right? Just hard work will beat the talent all day. Eventually, your hard work will become talent. So when you have both, take advantage of both when you can.
one of the people who I think subscribed to this podcast was an old wrestling team partner of mine. He had a season, I think it was a junior in high school, so like pretty late. He went like 6-10, like pretty shitty.
Right.
And then he worked harder than everyone in the room with a bunch of killers and a bunch of people that were successful. He went like 35-9, and like went to states.
Wow.
And then he wrestled in college. But like 2 years ago, if you would have told that guy, if you'd have told any coach that this guy who was like basically JV, like couldn't do it, would be, all state, all conference in a year, they'd be like, you're crazy. Then he goes on after college and he becomes like a special operations in the military. Just the hardest working guy you've ever met. And it's the same. It's exactly what you're talking about. Like that guy, Anthony, is who you rather pick than the most talented person who just wastes the gift.
Give me somebody that works. I mean, going back to wrestling, and I wish I could remember his name. It's off on top of my tongue. But they just made a movie about it where he's a wrestler, only has one leg. I can't remember his
Anthony
name.
Robles?
Yes, Robles. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So I mean, look at that guy, man. Look at that guy. Look at the hard work that he put in to stay on top of his game. I think it was 3 years in the collegiate level, right? Even though he lost the first one, but he became national champ. Imagine that guy was disabled, and he became national champ. Disabled. What's your excuse, right? That's what I use that. Like, what's your excuse, man? You have both. You have all your limbs. You have your mouth. You can talk. What's your excuse? This guy did everything possible, being disabled, and became #1 in the country. What is your excuse today? What is it? Oh, I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Oh, my car broke down. I got a flat tire. That's not an excuse. That should just make you work harder, that you need money to fix that.
One of my buddies from college, Nick Grimm, had gotten into an accident when he was 3 years old. His dad, freak accident with a lawnmower, lost his leg. Wow. Led the team in wins. And it's just like, but you saw him and you just like, he
those
loved
stories get me right here, man. Those stories get me right here.
He loved being there more than people that were state champions and all national rank. They were like, oh, he's like, oh, hell yeah, we get to do this again today. And he made, he treasured that one leg he had more than most people take for granted their 2 legs that work just fine. So that's awesome. That's a great story. One other thing I want to talk about with confidence and success, John, and this is going to be real theoretical, but you're someone who is valuable to hear from. The people that show up with more confidence, and maybe they don't have the track record, but then they become successful because they have the confidence first. So they kind of they show up till they grow up. I don't like fake it till you make it. I like show up till you grow up.
Either even though I've used that in the past, because that was what you got from Wall Street. It was fake it till you make it, But I like that other term that you said, show up, man. That's honestly, that's the first part of it, is show up. Don't get me wrong. A lot of kids younger will show up to the wrong place, right? They won't have the right mentor. They don't have the right teacher. But they'll go there because the guy who runs the place, has a nice car, has a nice watch, goes out, at the clubs and spends a lot of money, but he's not really teaching them. And I've had a few of those guys in my career trajectory that I looked up to the wrong people. I followed their lead, but they weren't really leading me the right way, right? Yeah. But then there was other people that, had the nice car, nice watches, whatever, but they taught you, they explained to you, and they said, listen, this is how you do it. This is how you get to this level. Not by just banging a phone and then thinking that, you got somebody to close is how it actually works. He's like, then there's follow-up. That's a whole different side of sales. He's like, most guys that come in, he goes, like me, you, John, most guys come in, they want to bang, 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 open new deals, make the freaking 50, 100 grand, and then they never call that guy ever again. They're like, why would you put, and this is what, why I feel I'm successful even more now is my follow-up game, right? Okay. Meaning that I have, in my space, I barely pick up the phone in my industry. I get a ton of referrals and I do my follow-ups on the deals that I have closed. But when you're younger, they just teach you to bang the phone, get new clients. They don't teach you how to follow up. And so a lot of guys that just show up, they're showing up to the wrong place because their mentor's not teaching them the right way. And then, then they get that sour taste in their mouth and they don't want to try sales again because they tried it. They did put their heart and effort into it, but they were never taught the right way. So the next person that they see, they have it in the back of their head. I didn't get paid. I didn't make a paycheck. It's so hard. It's so hard. I can't do it. I can't do it. And it sort of sours the game for the newer people.
Dude, that's fucking crazy. So yeah, excuse my
No,
French
listen,
there,
I mean, this is,
because your first sales training was like, dude, people probably spend fortunes to get sales training or would from where you got sales training. So you didn't have that problem at the start. And because you didn't have that problem at the start, and you had who you are as your DNA with your drive and your life experiences and the good training. I mean, no wonder you're confident. You walk into a new spot, you're like, I'm going to run this show in a month. They probably might have thought you were full of crap.
no,
And
listen,
they
90%
might
of
have
them,
thought that.
any
But you
place
were
that
like,
I've ever walked into,
yeah,
everybody, anytime I started a new place, bro, I would walk in and I would be like, all right, who's the top guy? I'm taking him out. And people are like, bro, that guy's doing $2 million a month. I don't care. That's my
whatever.
goal. And
Yeah.
if not, and if I don't, but guess what? It just made me work harder anyway to try to
Yeah.
beat him out. And listen, there was some guys that I couldn't beat. There was some monsters, man, that were
Sure.
doing serious numbers. And I'm just like, excuse my friend, how the heck did they do that? Or how the
Yeah.
heck are they doing that? But I try to get as close to them as possible, right?
But you're in the right room. You don't
Right.
get better. If you were to go to the worst sales organization ever and be the best guy at the worst spot, who cares? If you're the best guy at the best spot, then that's
Right.
really something to be proud of.
Listen, I also look at it this way too, right? You walk into a sales floor, and then if there's only 2 guys doing well, and then there's 20 other guys not doing well, you have to say to yourself, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Right? So I didn't realize this till later on either, because I didn't, I guess my mental capacity wasn't thinking about that side of it now that I'm a business owner,
Yeah.
is that if you walk into a firm with 30 guys and only 2 are doing well, that means that there's something wrong.
Yeah.
Right? If they're all not succeeding, something's wrong. Right? So now, when I have guys come into my office, I want to see everybody succeed. And don't get me wrong, not everybody's going to always be good at it. But if you have 50 guys and only 5 are succeeding, there's something wrong. Right? It's either that, the owner's, playing keeps to the top guys and feeds only the top guys, or takes the work of the hard guys that are on the phone, give it to the top guys. And if that's the case, then really your system's screwed up. Yeah. Or there's not the right training where these guys are moving up and being a top producer. That's, to me, is more of a bigger issue, because why would you want to waste time and have 50 guys on the phone for you and only 5 guys are performing, and then you have another 40 guys that are not performing? If you had those other 40 guys performing, me as an owner, I'm making more money.
Sure.
So why wouldn't I want to be on that floor grabbing a phone from somebody, show them how to close a deal? Guys don't do that out there. They used to. Back in Wall Street days, you had a phone. If your broker heard you say something stupid, they'd rip that phone out of your ear and close the guy so you can see what's going on and show that everybody on the floor, yes, I'm that guy. Yes, I close these deals. This is how you're supposed to do it. But I feel over the years, I think, our generation or younger generation has gotten a little bit weaker. And the reason why I say that is
it's gotten too easy.
Right. It's gotten too easy.
We've been handed the lessons that you learned when putting spaghetti in your pocket with butter, and the lessons you learned having to help your parents pay the rent, that people will just do anything they can to avoid that or make excuses for that.
But but also their parents just have, back them up. Like, and don't get me wrong, I get it. You come from, if your family has money, I'm happy for you. Right.
Sure.
But like, there was guys that I'd come into my office, we'd give them a small $300 a week training salary, but as soon as they did something wrong, and, this is how I was taught. I mean, I was hitting the head with phones back in the day. Like, if you didn't do the right thing, they'd come and smack you with the phone. They would tape you to the chair so you didn't get up off your desk. Like, that's how I got trained. Like, my feelings weren't hurt. Right. But now I do not even a smidgen to what they used to do to me back in the day. But like, as soon as you be vocal to a younger kid, they get, they get their feelings hurt. They're like, oh my God, you yelled at me. I'm like, bro, if you can't handle a little bit of this, you'll never make it in sales ever. And please take your stuff. Thank you for coming in. Like, if you can't take a little bit of a harsh objection, and a little bit of training,
How do you ever get
you're just
better?
not meant for it, man. I'm
Yeah.
like, I think there was one kid, I was telling him, this is how you have to do it. And I would repeatedly, this is how you do it. This is how you do it. And he did it wrong. And then, so I walked by and I sang the song, If I Only Had a Brain. And he took it offense. He was like, "Oh, you're insulting me." I'm like, "Wow." I'm like, "Please, I love you. Get out of my office." I'm like, if you just can't take, like, I'm trying to have fun during the day too, because you have
You
to have
got to.
fun while you're working.
Positivity.
Yeah, you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Like, some people take the way I do things the wrong way, because that's the way I was trained. So I had to learn to sort of change that a little bit, is because I was taught harsh, man, like in your face, like, this is not for the weak, man. You're in battle, you're in the trenches. If you were in World War II with, like, the younger generation, bro, you would just slap with a gun and you were thrown into the trenches. If you didn't fight, you died. Like,
Yeah.
this is it. Pretend the guy on the other phone is trying to kill you and take money out of your hands so you can feed your family. What are you going to do? It's either he's going to kill you or you're going to kill him. You're in the trenches, man. Go to war. Learn how to do everything you can to win that conversation. Otherwise, you die. And some people just don't see it like that. I do. I happen to think that if I lose on that sale, guess what? Now that sale, there's no money in my pocket to pay my mother's hospital bills, to pay my dad's car wreck that he just had. It's not there. So I take it personal when I don't close a deal. I say, oh my God, what did I do wrong that I didn't sell that guy? So as you can
Mm.
see, I get emotional about it, because
I get
yeah.
fired. Yeah, I'm getting fired up right here. I'm just trying to think of the best way to piggyback. It's like the generation. I totally agree. Right, like younger than me, and a lot of people that are my peers. When I first started working for myself, like 6 years ago, dude, like it feels like yesterday. You can remember. I can remember it like it was yesterday. And still, like even a year or two ago, I've been self-employed now for 6 years. It's like, oh, when are you gonna get a job? Like, are you done? Like, when are you gonna get back to the real world? Like, what the fuck do you mean? And before I did it and when I
Right.
talked about it, all my friends had jobs stable. Like, they're all doing fine and hated their job, love the weekend, security. They're like, you're nuts. Like, you're not going to go out and party with us on Saturday. Like, no, I got work to do. Oh, you're not going to go out to brunch on Sunday? No, I got
No,
work to
got
do.
work to do.
And they're just like, you're crazy. Like, why are you doing that? And I'm like, if you think I'm crazy, that's probably the best compliment that I could get. Still like the guys, like would love to catch a football game, watch sports with you, have a beer, whatever. Great. But like 90% of the time, people that I would say my age younger, they just never experience what hard feels like.
And that's the issue, right? And it's like, how do you change that, right? So, like, when we were kids, when I grew up in Queens, my family was like, don't come back until it's dark.
Yeah.
They didn't care where you were.
Yeah.
Just come back and whatever you had to do back, back then, whether you were in a park, you were 10, 20 blocks down. Like, if you got, if somebody came and tried to steal your lunch money, you fought for it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Or you
these
don't eat.
days, they just get coddled, and they're not, like, they don't know life lessons. They're not learning the life lessons that they should learn. And to me, that's an issue. And once again, that's a whole different conversation, I think. But, when you come to the workforce and something happens and, like, oh, I got to call my mommy. I'm like, what? And you're 17 years old? What? It just doesn't make sense to me sometimes.
Well, John, I'm going to ask you one more question.
Sure.
Wrap it up. Is if you could go back to the John that was maybe 15, 16, getting to school late because you were working in the morning. What are some of the things that you would say? Not to change anything.
Yeah, I wouldn't
Like
change anything.
what are some of the things that you'd like to tell that person?
My younger self, I would probably say, it's a funny saying, and like, believe half of what you see and none of what you hear. Because I believed in a lot of people back in the day when it came to trying to figure stuff out. Like I said, after my family got divorced, like my father, my stepfather, my mom. So to me, that would be the biggest thing. I wanted to be able to open up my eyes earlier in life. Right.
Mm.
I wish my eyes opened up sooner, in that, seeing it, because I did have a good childhood. Like I said, I didn't want for nothing with my family when we were married, when my parents were married. I didn't want for nothing. If I wanted a new bike, I had it. I wanted a new Hutch Pro Racing bike, all chrome, the one I got it. But when it split up, I didn't see it. because I did have a good upbringing until my parents got divorced. Then it was a little rougher. I would just wish I would have just understood it earlier, and I think I would have, maybe not been on the same career path, but just looked at life a little bit differently.
So you would have understood that life is hard at a younger age, even earlier. And when I say life is hard, I don't mean, what I mean is, hey, people are going to try and tell you things, and it's going to sound like this is the easy way.
Right.
But really, the hard way is the easy way once you get good at being the hard way.
100%. And it's just, and just figuring out that, just always trust yourself.
Mm.
Whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, that's how you learn. Because without a mistake, how do you know what to fix? Right. So to me, that like those are the most important things, because when you start trusting people, I guess to help you out, you're always going to be let down. But if you trust yourself to do it, you're never going to let yourself down, because there's always going to be a learning lesson from whatever goes wrong.
That's well said. I buy that. Here, I'll sign on the dotted line.
All right, I'll send you the contract.
Awesome. John, last thing is, where can people find you?
You can find me on TikTok, Instagram as Johnny Cash Advance. You can find me on LinkedIn as John Baron DiCanio. Facebook is John DiCanio. I'm around. I put out videos. I put out training videos. I talk about my industry, which is the alternative finance space, a lot. I'm glad that you had me on, Ross. I really appreciate it, man. I was looking forward to this, to do something like this with you, man. And you've been great. And all the questions were nice and smooth. I appreciate that.
Just like we're swimming, brothers, like water. Well, everyone listening, I hope you guys had as much fun as John and I had. Look, take some of these stories and these lessons and just take action. Apply that shit, because without changing your behavior, you didn't really learn anything. So my only ask is, take something from here and have it possibly affect what you do daily.
100%. And once again, just believe in yourself. And, if you ever want to talk to somebody or a mentor, I'm sure Ross obviously is always going to be there for you guys. Look me up, like I said, on TikTok at Johnny Cash Advance. And I would love to talk to you and see if I can help change your life around a little bit.